Okay, I'll begin by, these were some of the questions that were submitted, as Adam said. So we are going to try and get these questions asked first. Some of them may be a little repetitive based on some of the responses that have already been made by our board members. So bear with it, maybe something new will come out of it. The first question, and it can be answered in any order. Why isn't the Department of Education getting involved?
Mine. Is on.
It's more of an opinion. I believe they take the same stance as most of our other elected officials in the area, saying that it's a local issue and it needs to be resolved and sorted out at the local level.
I too had a concern, as Joe said back in December, the first regular meeting of the newly elected officials when they voted to reopen Elderton. And the first question I asked of the solicitor at that time was, what process do we have to go through to reopen the school? Because when we voted to close it, we had to go through a 2-year process, public hearings, countless studies, deliberations, before we made that final vote, that final decision to close Elderton. And the response to me from the solicitor at the time was, all you need to do is send them a letter, and that's it. So a letter was sent to the Department of Ed saying that they voted to reopen Elderton, and that was it. That was all that had to be done, and it was really frustrating to me because we had to jump through so many hoops to close Elderton, and that was a case where we were actually going to save the district money, and at the very least, it wasn't going to harm the education of the students from Elderton, but to vote to reopen it, where it's going to cost more money to the taxpayers, and it could be argued that with this uprooting of the students again back and forth, it could harm the education. Nothing had to be done. So that was really the beginning of the frustration for me personally on the board, and I felt as though my hands were tied behind my back and there was nothing I can do. It's gone downhill from there.
Okay, next question. So this makes me laugh. Do we have a long-range plan for the Armstrong School District?
No, there's no long-range plans. In my opinion, there was never a long-range. There were some long-range plans back in the '60s that, unfortunately, to some people, they all included the consolidation of buildings, and nobody ever wanted to forecast what the district would look like in years to come. They were afraid, everybody was afraid of losing their school. We didn't want to lose this one, this one, this one. And I think that any school that was ever closed was done under a certain amount of protest. So there never really any great agreement on, okay, I'll close my school. I said one time before that it would be great to say you're going to close a school and 500 people show up and say it's a great idea. But that's not the case. It's always a struggle, and therefore, whenever you try to make a long-range plan to, you see the declining enrollment, and you try to factor that in to how that's going to be best suited for you for education and for paying for it, then the defense mechanisms flare up, and then it just stopped. Nobody wants to talk about what's best or where a school would be, or it just, we don't want it. I don't know if you guys know.
When I first got on the board, Jim and I, when we first got on the board, they had just gone through, the architects had conducted a very extensive analysis of all the building inventory in the district, and based on that analysis came up with 3 levels of possible renovations, and it brought that before the board. This all happened before Jim and I were elected 2 years ago. And at that point, it was decided that we're at a crossroads as a district. We need to have a plan. We need to know where we're going, where we're at right now, and then where we need to go. And that's where the charrette process, I don't know if anyone in here was part of that process, but the architects were they moderated the process, and they had all sorts of individuals from the communities come in and talk about where they're at, and then to propose some options. And obviously one of the options was to renovate every building that we have in a district at these different levels. The other alternative was to close some of the schools and build new schools. And so it really came down to that. I thought it was a pretty decent process. Again, it was before I was on board, but from what I had read, it involved a lot of stakeholders, taxpayers, parents, I think students, Joe, I don't know if they were part of that, administrators, school board, the board, and some others. And so I thought we were on our way, because I was getting that question a lot when I first came on board. Where do you want to go? What is your plan? And Dr. Kerr, and I'll never forget it, because he put it. I thought he put it just as succinctly as you could possibly put it. He said, "We need to have an intermediate step before we do anything, because we don't have any money in this district." And that's when he put forth the proposal to close Elderton. It was an intermediate step so that we can start to tackle any of the options that were brought up in the SHREC process. Before that, all it was a bunch of people talking about it, putting it down on paper. Yeah, it was a written document, but nothing could be enacted until we had the financing to do that. And so Dr. Kerr, that was his rationale for proposing closing Elderton, that would give us the necessary money to move forward as a district.
Okay, thank you. The next question. Were we able to realize any savings from the closing of Elderton High School? Did you have a chance for those to come in?
Not, I mean, the projected savings, because of the staff, the decline in the staff, the reduction in the staff was, the number you're seeing now to reopen the building was $2.5 million. You are right there. Was $2.5 million for staffing, and that includes the professional staff, all the coaches, the supplemental staff, all your coaches, all those support staffs also. And you're hearing another number, $500,000 for startup fees, startup costs for computers, some upgrades to the building. There was a freezer, I believe, that they needed that we didn't have to get because we closed it. So those are just some of the startup costs that would have been savings. Some of the computer equipment were on a cycle. When they were cycled out of that building and cycled into some of the other buildings and used the rest of their life to use up the time left on them on that life cycle. So now there's a few there that need replaced, so they've got to buy those new again, where we didn't have a need for them before, so now they need to be replaced and repurchased again. So there were savings that will be within this budget year. We'll see, but those were the projected savings that
So I'm guessing that Dr. Kerr, when he made the recommendation to close Elderton, this isn't on the list, but I have to ask. When he made the recommendation to close Elderton, he had an idea of the savings to the district.
Yes, those numbers that I stated to you, the $2.5 billion for those staff positions, I believe was the number that they used.
Was that a continued savings after the first year?
Yeah, it would be continually, because you've shed those costs and it's gone. You don't have it reoccurring again and again and again. You've saved it. If you hire them back again, you're going to have that cost. You're going to pay for it over and over again.